When the HOA president's obsession with her neighbor turned into arson, the community thought the fire was the end of it. They had no idea the real shock would come later when she came face to face with her victim in his own courtroom. "All rise," the bailiff called. The room fell silent as the heavy oak doors opened. Shackled at the wrists and wearing a county jumpsuit, Colleen Markham shuffled forward, eyes darting around the packed courtroom for a familiar face. But the moment she looked toward the judge's bench, she froze, sitting tall in his black robe, calm but unsmiling. Was Judge Andre Colston, the man whose house she had burned to the ground just days before. The air felt electric, heavy with disbelief. Colleen's knees gave out slightly, and the deputy had to steady her. Andre's gaze met hers, steady, unreadable. But behind his eyes was the weight of loss, his home, his memories, his peace, all gone because of the woman now sitting before him. "Be seated," Andre said. The benches creaked as everyone sat. The only sound was the faint scratching of reporters' pens. Colleen's attorney leaned close and whispered, "Don't look at him." But it was too late. Everyone had seen the moment their eyes met. A week ago, this community was arguing about hedges and porch lights. Now they were watching a hate-fueled crime unfold in a courtroom. Andre kept his composure. But inside, memories of that night played like a cruel movie. The roar of flames, the choking smoke, the sound of neighbors shouting his name. He remembered clutching his briefcase, one of the few things he'd saved, as his home collapsed into burning rubble. And now, the woman who started with petty complaints about mailbox colors and late porch lights sat in front of him. Unrepentant. Colleen's jaw was tight with defiance, but her trembling hands betrayed her fear. Reporters scribbled furiously. Neighbors in the gallery stared in disbelief. Andre took a slow breath. He knew everyone was watching him. Could he be fair? Could he judge the person who had destroyed his life? "Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty," Colleen's lawyer announced. The words hung in the air like smoke. Everyone knew the evidence, the gas can near the fence, the security footage showing her car circling the block. Andre's face stayed neutral, but inside, the denial burned. Then Colleen glanced up at him again, and what he saw made his stomach turn. Not fear, not remorse, but satisfaction. As if forcing him to face her from the bench was her final act of power, Andre straightened. "Very well. Plea has been entered." "We'll proceed." The room understood then. This was no ordinary case. It was personal. A collision of grief, hatred, and justice. But how it began wasn't in that courtroom. It started months earlier, in a quiet neighborhood in Wilmington, North Carolina. Judge Andre Colston had moved there for peace. A quiet two-story brick house near the coast, far from courtroom chaos. He liked order, calm, and privacy. But all of that changed when he met Colleen Markham, the HOA president. To some, Colleen was dedicated. To others, she was obsessed. She lived by the HOA rulebook. Grass no longer than 2 inches, porch lights off by 11, mailboxes only one approved shade of black. Their first clash came one evening when Andre was watering his plants. Colleen marched up his driveway, clipboard tucked under her arm. "Judge Colston," she said, "your porch light stays on too late." Andre set the hose aside. "Good evening, Miss Markham." "It shuts off at midnight for security," she frowned. "The bylaws say 11. You're disrupting the neighborhood." Andre studied her, calm but firm. "Noted, I'll look into it." It should have ended there, but it didn't. A week later, a letter arrived about his hedges being too tall. Then another about his mailbox color. He laughed it off. "If this is her biggest problem," he told his friend Marcus on the phone, "this neighborhood must be perfect." Marcus chuckled. "She sounds like the type who measures grass with a ruler." "She probably does," Andre said. But behind the humor, tension grew. Neighbors began to notice. Linda, the retired teacher down the block, whispered at the mailbox. "She doesn't bother anyone else like that." "Just you," Andre shrugged. "Maybe I'm unlucky," Linda frowned. "Unlucky doesn't send 3 letters in a month." Colleen's obsession became clear. If Andre parked too close to the curb, she took pictures. If guests visited, she timed how long they stayed. Her fixation with rules was turning personal. When Andre's sister Sharon stopped by for dinner, she noticed the stack of letters. "All this from the HOA?" she asked. Every single one, he said. You're a judge, she warned. Are you sure this isn't more than rules? Andre hesitated. I've thought about that, but I won't assume the worst. But Colleen was already heading there. Her complaints became constant, her stares more intense. She muttered at HOA meetings, he thinks he's above everyone else. By spring, her obsession was impossible to ignore. Neighbors whispered about her nightly walks, how she'd stop in front of Andre's house and just stare. She waits for him to mess up, one neighbor told Sharon. One Saturday morning, Andre was trimming roses when Colleen appeared again, no clipboard this time, just her phone camera. You know the rules about yard waste, she called out, taking photos. Andre straightened. Good morning. I take care of my yard, always have. She stepped closer. We'll see what the board says. Miss Markham, Andre said quietly, do you really think this is how neighbors should treat each other? Neighbors follow rules, she snapped. Some people think they're above them. Just then, his friend Victor pulled up. What's going on here? He asked. Colleen crossed her arms. Just ensuring compliance, Victor scoffed. Lady, he's got the cleanest yard on this street. Colleen's face flushed red. Without another word, she turned and stormed off. Victor shook his head. Man, she's got a problem. You better watch her, Andre sighed. I am. I just don't want to make it worse. But it was already getting worse. Colleen's muttering grew darker, her stares longer. The petty complaints kept coming, unauthorized gatherings, flag placement, anything she could twist into a rule. And though no one said it aloud, everyone felt it. Something was building, something dangerous. Colleen even filed a noise complaint when Andre's nephew practiced his saxophone for the school band at 5 o'clock on a Saturday. That was the moment Andre decided enough was enough. One evening, he walked across the street and knocked on her door. When Colleen opened it, she didn't look surprised. It was as if she'd been waiting for him. Miss Markham, Andre began, his voice calm but firm. This has gone far enough. I've respected your position with the HOA, but your constant complaints are harassment. This isn't about rules anymore. It's personal. Her lips curled into something between a smirk and a sneer. Personal? You think this is about you? I treat everyone the same. Andre leaned in slightly. Then why is my mailbox the only one you check twice a week? For a moment, her eyes flickered. Then she said flatly, because you don't belong here, not the way you think you do. Andre's jaw tightened. He'd heard enough. Good night, Miss Markham. As he turned to leave, her voice followed him like a cold echo. You can wear your robe in court, Judge, but it won't protect you here. Those words stayed with him long after he closed his front door. Sharon urged him to document everything, every letter, every word. If she crosses the line, she said, you'll need proof. Andre agreed, though part of him hated the idea. His home was supposed to be his refuge, not another courtroom. But Colleen wasn't giving him that choice. At the next HOA meeting, her hostility went public. When a neighbor praised Andre for helping shovel snow that winter, Colleen cut in sharply. Good deeds don't excuse violations, she snapped. This community has standards, and some people think they can ignore them because of who they are. Andre didn't respond. He just sat there, calm and quiet, while her words lingered in the air. The whispers that followed weren't about mailboxes anymore. They were about Colleen, and how far she was willing to go. But while the neighbors debated, Colleen was already planning her next move, and this time, it wouldn't just be letters or insults. To understand why her obsession hit so deeply, you have to see Andre Colston not just as a judge, but as a man. At 54, he'd built a life carefully balanced between duty and peace. His days were filled with difficult cases, but his evenings were meant to be calm. His house in Wilmington wasn't just brick and wood, it was memory. It was where his late wife, Janice, had planted hydrangeas by the fence, where his nephew learned to ride a bike in the driveway, where family laughter once filled the summer air. Every part of it mattered, the bookshelves lined with case law and history, the framed family photos on the mantel, the worn armchair he sat in before bed. This was his sanctuary, the place Colleen's hostility was slowly poisoning. One evening, Sharon stopped by with seafood takeout. The scent of fried shrimp filled the kitchen, but Andre barely touched his plate. You're not eating, Sharon said quietly. Andre rubbed his temples. I spend my day listening to arguments, and then I come home to another one across the street. It never ends, Sharon studied him. You've always been calm, Andre, but this woman, she's targeting you. You can't ignore that, he sighed. If I go after her legally, it turns into a spectacle. People will say I'm abusing my position. So what? Sharon pressed. She gets to torment you until you snap? Andre didn't answer. His eyes drifted toward the window, where Colleen's porch light glowed across the street. Later that week, his old friend Victor stopped by. They sat on the back porch, sipping iced tea, the hum of cicadas filling the air. Dre, Victor said, leaning forward. I've seen you handle murder trials without blinking. But this woman? She's under your skin, Andre nodded. She's not just nitpicking, Vic. There's something in her eyes. It's like she's trying to break me. Then protect yourself, Victor warned. Cameras, locks, whatever it takes. Don't let her catch you off guard. Andre took the advice seriously. He installed cameras around his property. Not because he thought Colleen would go too far, but because he needed peace of mind. At least that's what he told himself. But the footage only made things worse. She lingered on the sidewalk, staring into his yard. Sometimes she took pictures of nothing at all. One night, Andre replayed the footage with Sharon sitting beside him. She's obsessed, Sharon whispered. Look at her, just standing there at midnight. Andre frowned. Obsession is one thing. Malice is another. I need to know which one this is. He tried to keep life moving, work, family, church on Sundays, but home no longer felt safe. It felt like a courtroom with no verdict, a place where the trial never ended. One Friday evening, Andre sat on the porch with his nephew Julian, who had just turned 16. The boy glanced at the stack of letters beside them. Uncle Dre, he asked, why don't you just move? Andre looked at him surprised. Move? This is my home, Jules. Why should I leave because someone else can't stand me? Julian shrugged. Just seems easier. Andre smiled faintly. Easy isn't always right. If I run from people like her, she wins, and that's not the lesson I want you to learn. Julian nodded slowly, but Andre could see the worry in his eyes. He wanted to believe his own words, that patience and integrity would be enough. But deep down, he knew Colleen wasn't done. By early summer, her fixation had turned to open hostility. Neighbors whispered about it constantly. What used to be quiet gossip about hedges and lights had become fear. One evening, Andre came home late from court, jacket over his shoulder, tie loosened. Colleen's voice cut through the still air. You think you're better than us, Judge? She shouted from her porch, a wineglass in hand. Andre paused, keys in hand. It's been a long day, Miss Markham, he said evenly. Let's leave it at that, but she wasn't done. You think the rules don't apply to you, but I see through it. Andre said nothing. He walked inside and locked the door. Later that night, something hit the front door, a sharp thud. Sharon jumped. Andre checked the porch camera. A small rock lay on the mat. In the corner of the frame, Colleen's shadow moved away. This is harassment, Sharon said. Andre nodded. I'm documenting every action, every word. But until it's criminal, it's just nuisance. It's not nuisance, Sharon snapped. She's testing you, and she was right. Colleen's behavior grew bolder, pacing near his property, muttering under her breath. One family overheard her say, he doesn't belong here, not ever. The breaking point came at the next HOA meeting. The room was full. Andre sat quietly near the back. I want to address repeated violations, Colleen said sharply. Some people think they're above the rules. Everyone knew who she meant. Linda Garvey stood up. With respect, Colleen, Judge Colston's done more for this community than anyone here. Colleen cut her off. Good deeds don't erase violations. Some people hide behind titles, judges, lawyers, people who think they're untouchable. Gasps filled the room. Andre rose slowly, buttoning his jacket. His voice was calm, but it carried. I've respected this community, and I've respected you, Miss Markham. But this has gone too far. This isn't about rules, it's about you and whatever grudge you've decided to carry. The room fell silent. Colleen's face flushed with anger, but she said nothing. That night, Victor called. Dre, she's not stopping. She's escalating. Be careful, Andre sighed. I know. I just don't want to believe it'll go that far, but it did. Weeks later, One of his cameras caught Colleen standing at the edge of his driveway, 2 in the morning, scribbling in a notebook as she stared at his house. Andre called Victor the next morning. "She's losing control," he said quietly. Victor's reply was grim. "She already has. Now the question is, what's she going to do next?" Andre wanted to believe it would end there, with harassment, not violence. But deep down, he knew the truth. Colleen was building towards something worse, and when it finally came, it wouldn't be a rock or a threat. It would be fire. It started as a faint crackling, like twigs snapping in the distance. Then came the sharp, acrid smell of smoke seeping into the bedroom. Andre jolted awake, coughing, eyes watering. "Smoke," he muttered, still half asleep. He swung his legs off the bed, but as soon as he stepped into the hallway, the truth hit him. Thick, grey smoke was already creeping up the staircase, swallowing the air. The security alarm blared through the house, shrill and relentless. Andre pulled his shirt over his mouth, stumbling back into the bedroom. He yanked open the nightstand drawer, grabbed his phone, and dialed 911. His voice rasped as he gave his address. The dispatcher's calm voice came through. "Get out of the house immediately, sir. Fire crews are on the way." Heart pounding, Andre shoved the phone into his pocket and crouched low, pushing toward the stairs as the heat grew stronger by the second. Sparks popped like gunfire around him. When he finally reached the front door, flames were licking the walls, devouring photographs, paint, and wood alike. He burst through the door and stumbled into the cold night air, gasping for breath. Across the street, neighbors were rushing out of their homes. Linda Garvey screamed, "Andre! Over here!" She and her husband ran to him, pulling him toward the curb. Within minutes, sirens wailed in the distance. Red lights painted the neighborhood as fire trucks screeched to a stop. Firefighters leapt into action, unrolling hoses and shouting orders. Water thundered against the flames, hissing and roaring in the chaos. Andre stood barefoot on the curb, trembling, his breath shaky as he watched his home collapse in on itself. In his hand was his briefcase, the only thing he had grabbed on his way out. Inside were just case files. Everything else, his armchair, Janice's hydrangea notes, the framed family photos, was gone, turned to ash. 15 minutes later, Victor pulled up, breathless. He had come the moment Linda called. "My God, Dre, you okay? You breathing?" he asked, gripping Andre's shoulder. Andre nodded weakly, eyes still locked on the burning ruins. "She did this," he whispered. "I know she did." Victor's jaw tightened. "Who else would? Everyone's seen how far gone she's been." Fire investigators worked until dawn. By sunrise, the house was a blackened shell. Windows melted, roof collapsed, the smell of smoke hanging in the air. A fire marshal approached Andre, clipboard in hand. "Preliminary signs point to arson," he said. "Accelerants were found near the fence line. We'll run full tests, but this wasn't an accident." Andre's voice was quiet. "I already knew." 2 days later, detectives knocked on Colleen Markham's door. Footage from Andre's security cameras and 2 neighboring houses showed her car circling the block just before the fire started. When officers searched her garage, they found a half-empty gas can. Inhests matched it to the same accelerant used in the fire. The neighborhood buzzed, not about hedges or mailboxes anymore, but about betrayal. The HOA president, the woman who preached rules and order, had gone too far. When police led Colleen away in handcuffs, a small crowd of neighbors gathered to watch. She didn't hang her head or cry. She walked tall, chin lifted, eyes defiant. "She looks proud of herself," Linda whispered. Victor muttered back, "That woman's sick." Andre stood at a distance, silent. His house was gone, but his composure stayed intact, barely. Inside, though, something twisted painfully. It wasn't just a home he'd lost. It was his trust in the place he thought was safe. Days later, firefighters sifted through the rubble. Andre joined them, picking carefully through the debris until he found a half-burned photo of Janice and Julian at a picnic. The edges were blackened, their faces smudged with soot, but he held it like treasure. Victor stood beside him. "Dre, I don't even have words. But she's going to pay for this, you know that, right?" Andre nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the ruins. "Justice takes time," he said quietly, "and justice has to be fair." "Even for her," Victor shook his head. "You're a better man than me. Andre didn't answer. He just stared at what was left of his life. But the real shock was still coming, because days later, he'd walk into his own courtroom and see the woman who tried to destroy him sitting at the defendant's table. In the days after the fire, the smell of smoke lingered like a scar over the neighborhood. Andre's home, now just a skeleton of charred beams, stood as a grim reminder of how fragile life could be. Detectives combed through every inch of the site, while Andre sat across the street in a folding chair. Watching them sift through ashes, Detective Ruben Ortiz, a grizzled veteran, and his sharp young partner, Maya Dunlop, worked methodically through the debris. Ortiz approached Andre, holding a clipboard. "We found traces of accelerant all along the side of the house," he said. "Whoever did this wanted it to spread fast." Andre gave a grim nod. "I'm not surprised." Dunlop held up a melted plastic nozzle in an evidence bag. "We'll test it, but I'd bet it matches the residue from the fire." Andre exhaled slowly. "In the footage?" Ortiz nodded. "Your cameras caught a dark SUV circling the block around 2 a.m. Neighbor's doorbell cam confirmed the plate. It's registered to Colleen Markham." Andre's jaw tightened. "Of course it is. She's been harassing you for months, right?" Dunlop asked. "Yes. Letters, complaints, even threats." Ortiz jotted notes. "We'll need all of it. Letters, recordings, anything that shows her pattern." Andre gestured toward his sister Sharon, who approached with a folder. "She's been keeping records." Sharon handed it to Ortiz. "Every complaint she filed, every note she left." "I knew this would happen." Ortiz flipped through the pages, his expression hardening. "This helps a lot." Neighbors shared what they'd seen. Linda told detectives she had spotted Colleen pacing near Andre's property at night. Another neighbor, Pauline, swore she'd heard Colleen muttering, "He doesn't belong here," just days before the fire. Soon, everyone knew the truth. The woman who enforced every HOA rule had turned her obsession into violence. The morning of the arrest was quiet. Detectives Ortiz and Dunlop approached her door. "Miss Markham," Ortiz said evenly, "you're under arrest for arson and criminal mischief." Colleen didn't cry. She didn't protest. She simply lifted her chin as officers cuffed her wrists. Neighbors gathered, whispering, recording on their phones. Linda whispered, "I knew she'd snap, but arson? That's evil." Victor crossed his arms. "She's not just obsessed, she's dangerous." Andre stood across the street, silent. Watching her led away, he didn't feel anger or satisfaction, just a hollow ache. That evening, Detective Dunlop called. "The DA's moving fast. The charges include felony arson and possible hate crime enhancements." "It'll go to arraignment soon." Andre's voice was quiet. "And who presides?" Dunlop hesitated. "Given the rotation, it might be you." Andre closed his eyes. "Then we've got a problem. Because justice wasn't supposed to be personal. But for him, it already was." Monday morning arrived with a storm of media vans outside the courthouse. Reporters crowded the steps, cameras aimed at the entrance. Inside, the courtroom filled with residents from Andre's neighborhood, whispering, waiting. Andre entered through the side door, his black robe crisp, his expression unreadable. He'd done this thousands of times, but never like this. "All rise," the bailiff called. The heavy doors opened. Deputies led Colleen Markham into the room in an orange jumpsuit, wrists shackled. The crowd fell silent. Andre kept his eyes forward, though every memory of the fire flashed behind them. Colleen looked up and froze. Her eyes locked onto his. Color drained from her face. Then she lifted her chin in defiance. Her lawyer leaned in. "Don't look at him," he whispered. But everyone had seen it, the moment their eyes met. Andre cleared his throat, voice steady. "Court is now in session. Case of State versus Markham." A reporter in the back whispered, "The judge is the victim." "This is unbelievable," Colleen's attorney stood. "Your Honor, before we proceed, I must address the conflict. This case cannot continue under your jurisdiction." Andre folded his hands. "That will be noted. But until reassignment is confirmed, I'll proceed with today's hearing." Gasps rippled through the room. Colleen's eyes widened. "This is a setup," she muttered. Andre's tone sharpened. "Ms. Markham, you will remain silent unless spoken to." Her lawyer rose again. "My client pleads not guilty." The words hung in the air like smoke. Reporters scribbled faster, while neighbors exchanged stunned glances. Linda Garvey leaned toward her husband and whispered, "Not guilty? After everything we've seen?" Andre kept his expression calm, but the denial hit hard. His home was gone, the evidence undeniable, and yet she sat there shaking her head, refusing to own what she'd done. When the state's attorney listed the charges, felony arson, criminal damage, possible hate crime enhancements, the weight of it filled the room. But what truly unsettled everyone was Colleen's reaction. She smirked, just for a moment, but long enough for Andre to see it. That flash of satisfaction chilled him more than the fire ever had. During recess, Andre retreated to his chambers, the heavy door closing behind him. He dropped into his chair, head in his hands. Sharon knocked gently before stepping in. She had been allowed to offer quiet support. "You don't have to do this," she said softly. "Let another judge take over." Andre looked up, eyes weary but determined. "I can't walk away, Sharon. What message does that send? That fear wins? That she wins twice?" Sharon's voice lowered. "This isn't just another case, Andre. It's personal." "I know," he whispered. "But if justice only matters when it's easy, then it's not justice." When court resumed, Andre adjusted his robe, lifted his gavel, and looked straight at the woman who had tried to erase his life. For the first time, Colleen's confidence faltered. Her smirk disappeared. Her hands fidgeted. Whatever control she once held in their neighborhood had vanished under the weight of that courtroom. Yet beneath it all, Andre could see she still believed she could twist the story in her favor. But as testimony unfolded, it became clear this was bigger than two neighbors. It was about a community confronting hatred, power, and what justice truly meant. The trial moved quickly. The evidence was overwhelming. Surveillance footage, accelerant cans, witness accounts. The prosecution built a seamless case. But facts weren't the only thing on trial. Perception was too. Every glance, every pause in the courtroom carried its own meaning. By the second day, reporters from Raleigh, Charlotte, even national outlets filled the gallery, drawn by the sight of a judge presiding over the trial of the woman who had burned his home. Andre remained composed behind the bench, though each piece of evidence reopened wounds. When the fire marshal described the accelerant poured along the fence line, Andre's chest tightened. He could almost hear the flames again. The defense fought back. Gerald Hinton questioned the footage, suggested tampering, even hinted someone else could have used Colleen's SUV, but the jury wasn't convinced. Then came the witnesses. Linda Garvey took the stand first, her voice trembling at first, but growing steady. "She was obsessed," Linda said, glancing at Colleen. Always circling his house, muttering, "I told my husband something bad was coming." When Gerald implied she held a grudge, Linda shot back, "My only grudge is against people who think hate gives them power." Andre felt a quiet gratitude for her courage. Victor testified next. "I've known Andre 30 years, he said. "I saw how she went after him. I told him to be careful, but I never thought she'd light his house on fire." Colleen sat rigid, sometimes scribbling furious notes, sometimes shaking her head. Her calm only cracked when the 911 audio played, Andre's voice hoarse with smoke, gasping for air. For the first time, her face went pale. Sharon was in the front row every day, hands clasped tight. Tears welled as photos of the burned home flashed before the jury. During a break, she whispered, "Every picture feels like losing Janice, all over again." Andre squeezed her hand. "We'll get through this," he said quietly. But inside, he wrestled with doubt. Was he being too harsh? Too lenient? Reporters analyzed his every move, dissecting his tone and expression. When the defense motioned for a mistrial, claiming bias, Andre's voice stayed firm. "This court will proceed as scheduled." Motion denied. The gavel struck sharp as thunder. Whispers rippled across the room, but the trial moved on. By closing arguments, the air felt thick with tension. The prosecutor stood tall. "This isn't about rules," she said, pointing to the charred photos. "It's about hate, obsession turned violent. Judge Colston lost his home, but not his life. That's why this is arson, not murder." Gerald's counter was desperate, painting Colleen as misunderstood and overburdened. But the jury's faces were set. When they returned after just 4 hours, the room fell silent. The foreperson rose. We, the jury, find the defendant, Colleen Markham, guilty of felony arson, guilty of destruction of property, and guilty of aggravated harassment with hate crime enhancement. Relief washed over the gallery. Sharon wept quietly. Victor exhaled. Linda clasped her husband's hand. Colleen froze, whispering, "No, this isn't right," her denial collapsing into disbelief. And 2 weeks later, at sentencing, she stood in cuffs, weary and pale. The prosecutor spoke first. This was no accident. It was deliberate. The community cannot thrive under fear. Gerald pleaded for leniency, but it rang hollow. When Andre finally spoke, the courtroom leaned in. "You burned down my home," he said steadily. "You destroyed years of memories. You endangered lives because you couldn't see me as your equal." He paused, voice thick with resolve. "Justice isn't vengeance. It's truth. And the truth is simple, you chose hate. Now you must live with the consequences. The sentence, 22 years in prison, parole after 15. The gavel fell once, final. Outside, reporters surrounded him. Andre's words were brief. "I lost a house, but what's at stake is bigger. When neighbors stop seeing each other as equals, hate grows. We can't ignore it. We have to confront it." That night, he stood before the ruins of his home. Sharon joined him, resting a hand on his shoulder. "You did it, Dre. You stayed true." He nodded. "Justice isn't easy, but if it was, it wouldn't mean anything." Neighbors came, some with casseroles, others with simple thanks. "You didn't just win," Victor said. "You showed us what courage looks like." Andre smiled faintly. "Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing not to let fear decide what happens next." As the night settled, he whispered to himself, "We're still standing. That's enough." The story of Colleen Markham spread far beyond Wilmington, a lesson shared across dinner tables and courtrooms alike. It reminded everyone that obsession and hate can destroy, but dignity and justice can rebuild what's lost. And that's the truth we need today. Don't look away. Speak up, stand firm, because these aren't just stories. They're warnings, lessons, and glimpses of what it means to be human.